Welcome to the Migraine Miracle Moment. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Turknett. I'm a neurologist, migraine specialist, migraine sufferer, and author of the book, The Migraine Miracle. In this podcast, you'll learn all about how to find your path to migraine freedom without pills. Let's get started. I am delighted and honored today to welcome a special guest on our podcast. Today we have Anne joining us. Hello, Anne.
Hello.
So Anne was kind enough to come on, and she is one of our Migraine Neverland members, and is kind enough to come on and share her story with us today, because we know how much hearing these kind of stories helps everyone. So we are fortunate to have her on today. And Anne, so let's get started with kind of taking us back to how things began, how your story with the Beast first started. Do you have a first memory of migraine?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, I do, like in hindsight, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I traveled with my family when I was 6 years old back east on a red-eye flight. And that's the first time I remember having that feeling that I later identified as a migraine. And then, not frequently, but every now and then throughout my childhood, particularly when I had that lack of sleep, if I had to get up really early or for whatever reason had disrupted sleep, then I would often get a migraine.
So you said 6 years old.
I was 6 years old. That's the
Do you
first
remember
time.
what symptoms there were back then? Was it a headache, or do you recall?
I think it was kind of a headache, but just
Uh-huh.
kind of also just feeling awful. The
Yeah.
stomach, the whole body just feeling out of whack and not being able to understand why, but I wasn't sick, but
Right.
no one was able to really identify what the matter was.
Yeah. Periodic, oddness and feeling poorly in various different ways is oftentimes how it manifests in children, and it can be tricky to figure out what's going on. So
Yeah.
very
And then
rarely is it just a, classic kind of stuff that we're used to as adults. But at what point did they get to a point where you were wanting to do something more about them?
Yeah, so like a lot of people, teenage years, early adulthood, sort of menstrual migraine,
Mm-hmm.
sort of hormonal started. Um, and then throughout college, during periods of like, again, for sleep or lots of stress. And at the time, I didn't know they were migraines. I just chalked them up to tension headaches.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, sort of sinus headaches. I've probably been through every sort of sinus treatment, like short of surgery, in terms of like nose sprays and nasal rinses and antibiotics and
Interesting.
all
Yeah.
these things. And then finally, I don't think I knew they were migraines until probably my late 30s. Finally, I guess a doctor told me that it was a migraine that I was experiencing, and then promptly recommended Excedrin migraine.
Uh-huh.
And so, like any sort of effective medication, it worked great to start with. I was like, great. And then, the advice, take it the first sign of migraine. So I was very diligent, good at following instructions.
Right.
First sign, I would take an Excedrin migraine, and then I would take another one, and I'd take another one. And then slowly but surely, I was getting more and more headaches, more and more severe. And then at one point, I realized I was at Walgreens yet again buying the 2-pack of Excedrin migraine.
Right.
And I thought, this is not a good sign.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what to do about it. I never heard of rebound.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kept taking it. And then finally, I was at the library with my kids and saw a book on the reshelf saying Breaking the Headache Cycle. So I thought, oh, that's what I need to do. So I grabbed that book. It was this little paperback, and it said, it talked about rebound. So I read it and realized, this is what's happening. It's called rebound. So I'm
Right.
going to stop taking this medication. So ever since then, I've never taken Advil or Tylenol. I mean, maybe if I had a high fever or something, but
Right.
other than that, I never take those medicines. And then I didn't take anything at all for the next 10 years, I guess. And I still continue to have migraines, but they did get better after I stopped taking the Excedrin migraine. The intensity was less, the frequency was less, but they were still mostly sort of hormonal. My doctor assured me that when I hit menopause, they would magically go away. And I was like counting on that. I really was. And then I guess in 2017, they really started getting worse. And I had just gone through menopause. So it seems strange. But I didn't have any idea why. But at that point, I really felt bad enough to, check in with my doctor, which I really hadn't checked in a lot. Like I don't know if I'd ever seen a neurologist, just kind of running it by my primary care, my rheumatologist, whatever doctor I was seeing. But then I began taking triptans, and I tried triptans years before, but just felt like they messed with my head and didn't feel like it was worth it. But at this point in 2017, I did feel like it was worth it. So I started, and it was a miracle, like everyone says. And, but I did start noticing I was taking more and more, and then instead of taking one, then I was taking two, and I knew you weren't supposed to take two, but like, I didn't know what else to do. And, at the same time, I was I didn't think they caused rebound. For some reason, I didn't think triptans caused rebound. And I don't know if I was told that or if I just thought that, or I don't know why I thought that, but for whatever reason, I did think that was the case, because I never would have taken them had I known they caused rebounds. Because obviously, based on my Excedrin migraine experience, I'm very susceptible to rebound. So then I think fast forward to September 2020, and I'm trying yet again to refill my prescription for Imitrex early. For I don't know how many months in a row, and my doctor just called me up. She said, I can't do this. I cannot refill this. You are taking too much at your age. This is a powerful neurological drug. I just can't feel right about prescribing so much to you. And so that was kind of it. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, right. What did she have any advice then? Like what next?
No. She didn't.
You're not the only one that's happened to, but
I guess she was willing to refill it, but just at the right time.
Right.
I think is probably what her thinking was, is like she thought it was reasonable enough to take the prescribed dosage, but I couldn't keep pushing the envelope. And by that time I was taking, I think, nortriptyline preventatively, although I couldn't really tell that I was doing much, but just in case, kept taking it. But as soon as she told me that this was a problem, I thought, I looked into it and did find out that, it does cause rebound. So as soon as I found that out, I knew what it was, and I just stopped taking it cold turkey, because I knew it was just going to get worse and worse if I continued taking that medication. So that was September 2020. And then for the next 6 months, I just kind of flitted around trying to figure out what to do. I did self-hypnosis, which actually helped somewhat. I mean, it kind of harnesses a lot of the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness. So that was somewhat helpful. And I had an idea just on my past history that electrolytes, I get dehydrated easily. So I thought electrolytes would probably be helpful. So I was drinking a lot of Gatorade. It has electrolytes.
It does.
And then I found I did find an approach that was more like high electrolyte, high salt, somewhat low carb, but just wasn't very systematic. It was kind of helping around the edges, but I couldn't quite grasp where to go with that. So then I was talking with a friend of mine who's a gastroenterologist, I guess in March 2021. And trying to get the timeline right here.
Right. It's not easy.
And he was, just telling what I was doing, what I'd been through. And he's like, yeah, the low carb thing makes a certain amount of sense. Because I kind of was grasping at low carb, but wasn't really doing it in any systematic way.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he told me that, I thought, well, maybe I should look into that more, see what actually the medical research is on that, if there is any at all. I don't know. So, went to Google, and then, of course, your excellent SEO turned up the Migraine Miracle program, which at least at first I was a little put off by, frankly, because I didn't believe there was a miracle in terms of you take one pill or you do one thing, and
Right.
all of a sudden this lifelong problem resolves itself. I was skeptical,
Right.
to say the least.
Right.
But when I started actually looking into it and looked at the book online and looked at the reviews, I thought, okay, that's not what he's saying. So then I got that book, and I think I actually got the keto book first because I was looking for the low carb, and then quickly realized that the keto book was kind of part 2.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then I needed to go back to the Migraine Miracle book. And then, once I saw that and understood where your program was going, I realized that was the missing link for me, was the system and putting it all together. So I joined the Beastslayer Academy, or MIGRAI-NEVERLAND, went through the Beastslayer program, did all those things, and it, began working. I think, unlike some people who say, oh yeah, I did it for a week and haven't had a migraine since. I mean, that's not been my experience. It's been a much longer process.
Right.
But I still could see progress right away. And I just knew that it was going to work.
What gave you that faith? Was it, I won't put words in your mouth. What was it, you think?
I think everything you were saying made sense, right?
Okay.
It wasn't that you weren't saying anything outlandish, or, all the pieces kind of fit together, like mindfulness, the exercise, the diet, of course, the getting off of the medications, which I had already done. So that wasn't a struggle for me, but I know it is really challenging for some. It just felt like something I could implement.
For you, after going through it initially, what were kind of the most significant changes that you had to make that were different than what you'd already been doing?
I think the diet, of course, although I had had gestational diabetes with all 3 of my kids, so I had done low carb diet before. My dad has managed his diabetes for a long time with the low carb diet, so that wasn't as unfamiliar to me as it might be for some people.
Right.
And I was always a person who cooked at home, not ever used a lot of, processed food. So the cooking part wasn't hard. I mean, interestingly, my kids were all vegetarians, so I had been used to cooking that way, which actually, I mean, I found this diet to be so much less work.
It is very true. It is very
Throwing
simple.
a piece of chicken in the oven is nothing compared to like making all these different, rice dishes and all the chopping and all that. Although I do like to cook, I didn't mind doing it, but I have noticed a significant amount of time back in my day from this this diet. And also a lot of less as an environmental factor. I know people are concerned about the meat, environmental cost of meat, but I don't think I waste as much food.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's that.
Yeah, I think we're probably in the same boat. We probably waste a lot less than we used to.
That's true.
Yeah, so you were at least implementing the diet piece wasn't too much of a hurdle for you.
Right.
Initially. What would you say, like, was the biggest difference in terms of what you might have been eating before versus now? Like, were there things you cut out? Were there things you added in that they're kind of, if you describe like what things look like before versus now?
I think I just eating a lot more meat. I just was never a natural meat eater, even as a child. And then my kids were vegetarian. So I was essentially cooking vegetarian at home, and I would eat meat if we went out or if we were at friends for dinner or whatever. But I didn't cook meat.
Gotcha.
So
And
that
then
has been a change.
um, any other besides the diet piece, any other changes that you've made lifestyle wise?
Yeah, I, had always meant to do meditation. It would be good, but I never actually did it. So
Uh-huh.
I got a meditation app and started doing a session every day. At first, inconsistently. I think I thought it would be good to do it like in the evening, but then I would
Hmm.
forget or not do it. So I started doing it first thing when I woke up. So just like wake up, first thing I do. So, I think I'd always been pretty good about exercise and walking. So I just continued that. That
Hmm.
was not too big of a challenge. I think the biggest challenge for me has really been mindset. And I know, so I was in one of Jenny's small groups, which
Uh-huh.
I have to recommend.
Well, thank you. It was a great
Yeah,
group the time you went through. We had a really great group.
we had a great group,
Mhm.
and I think it just helped me. Like I've said, what I liked about the program was the systems, and
Hmm.
I think Jenny and the other group members really helped me refine what I was doing. Even the diet piece, which I felt like was pretty smooth, but I was doing a few things that I, tweaking around the edges kind of helped. And then, started to try intermittent fasting. So I have an eating window from 10 to 6, which is huge for me because I've been one of those people who like wake up at 6 a.m. My stomach is rumbling and I'm just ready to eat. And, with the low carb, I think those sort of highs and lows
Hmm.
have resolved, but I found that helpful because I do most frequently get migraines in the morning. So if I can just avoid that altogether, and start eating after that kind of time period, it just seems to help.
And do you find, say, before you would get hungry right when you woke up, that you feel like that's changed now? Is it challenging for you to wait? I think you said till 10 a.m.
Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just surprised how level my energy is
Yeah.
now.
You mentioned that mindset was one of the challenges. What specifically was what needed to change, or what is different about it now versus before?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, it's still a work in progress. I haven't
As with
always,
it, is it with all of us, for sure.
yeah. But what I did realize was I just couldn't, even when I was making progress, I couldn't enjoy it.
Mhm.
I would still be looking around the corner for the next migraine or thinking, am I going to, I mean, it was just on my mind all the time. Am I
Yeah.
about to get a migraine? Am I going to, and in part was because it was somewhat, they were so unpredictable
Hmm.
that I just never knew. So it was hard to plan anything, hard to enjoy anything because it might end at any moment. And now I feel like, yeah, I still do get migraines, but probably, now if I look at it, it's like every 30 days or every, 35 days or 40 days even. Even when that was the case, it was still hard to kind of believe it.
Right. You still like, this is too good to be true, or we've all had the experience over the years of thinking maybe things were in a better place, and then we have another setback, and you don't want to like have false hope.
Right.
You want to be realistic, but and then like you said, there's the issue of, if you've spent years like with this on your mind all the time, it's hard to break free of that. Even, when things are going better.
Yeah, it's true. I even did a few sessions of cognitive behavioral therapy just to kind of help break that because
Right.
it was really a problem for me. And
Yeah.
that has helped.
Yeah. We have all kinds of habits, including habits of thought, and you've been thinking the same thought patterns for years. They don't just go away. So you have to do
Yeah.
something to get to put some new ones in there. For you, along this process of after you found us and then worked at the Beastslayer Academy, did the Slayer Squad, were there any kind of aha moments where you like saw something completely differently, or that you took and said, "Oh, this is a piece that I really want to implement," or anything like that you can recall?
I mean, there's a lot, honestly.
Well, good.
I got a lot out of it. So, I mean, I know a lot of people mentioned in previous interviews, Starve and Sink, and
Uh-huh.
I've come to that somewhat late. I only started doing that very recently and actually had my first sort of preemptive fasting last week when I had an optometrist appointment and dental fillings on the same day. And I was like, I think I better just fast today, even though I was feeling fine.
Right.
But that was a first for me, and it worked great. But then the other things like, the Groundhog Day strategy, that was so powerful. I think just actually noticing when things go well and repeating them is great. And then I really liked the placebo effect. I found that really interesting. Harnessing the placebo effect for good rather than
right.
And I don't know, maybe you can explain a little better than I can, but
well, there are a few spots that I used it, but you talked about before about the trying to switch your mindset. So we are as migraineurs, and part of this is just kind of how it's commonly framed, how we often talk about it. It ends up being it's a very negative framing around a lot of things, and so we end up because of that. We have the nocebo effect, the opposite of the placebo effect, happening a lot of the time, where the expectation of something going wrong makes that more likely to happen. And so a lot of the things that are, I guess, in the academy and so forth are trying to flip that mindset, flip that framing of how you see different, pieces to, what are all the things that can help me? And how can I expect, how can I use that to expect a better outcome, right? We're used to the idea of the world, having triggers, right? And having all of these things that can harm us. And we're sort of constantly on the lookout for that, which is sort of this, sort of negative expectation of, all the time. And then if we can instead look for all of the positive things that can help us, then we're harnessing that placebo effect, the power of positive expectations to help us. And then I don't know if you were thinking also of the harnessing the placebo effect with paired conditioning.
Yes,
where
exactly.
You can
like my migraine helmet and the essential oils. The essential oils I was not actually successful with, but the migraine helmet it's been great. I love that.
Yeah.
My favorite things of all time.
Right. So we can use that. You can pair some, you can use conditioning to your advantage, and which is pairing some stimulus with another one. So one of the examples I used was if you were trying to, help with insomnia or getting to sleep, and you took a sleeping pill and you paired it with something else like an essential oil, and over time you could end up, where you're conditioning the response of getting sleepy to the oil rather than the pill, right? So, and there's that whole principle can apply to so many different things where you can pair, one stimulus with something else that helps facilitate some kind of state that you want to be in, and then you can start populating your environment with those things.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting concept, and I think it sounds like something we should be trying to do more of.
That's right. Yes,
I agree. Yeah, all of us. It's easy to forget about those sorts of things. Did you have any specific questions you want to ask?
Well, I did. I know one of the things that we talked about in our small group was you were having some difficulty navigating some social situations in terms of, when you were I think you entertained a lot and had people for weekends, and how do I do the meal timing, or so how do you want to talk a little bit about how you've navigated those situations successfully?
Yeah, I mean, first I think that I'm lucky in that my family and friends have been pretty supportive. I haven't gotten anybody like really trying to argue me out of it or anything. I mean, I think they all have understood I've been dealing with this for a long time, and that I need to try this. And particularly at first, I think now people have just gotten used to it. Actually, I had a bunch of people over like the last 2 weekends, and nobody even asked me about it. I was just kind of, in part doing my own thing. Like, they were all having an early breakfast, and I was like, I'll eat later. I mean, and I think that and when people did ask me, I think just saying, look, this is what I'm doing for now. And they would be like, okay, that's great. Instead of like drawing a line in the sand. I think people just were less defensive, I think, because I think in some ways when you make a change, it makes them question what they're doing, even if they're not they don't need to be doing anything different. And I'm not saying they should, but
Right.
they may take it that way.
Right.
Was that one of the issues you were trying to deal with initially, was like having to figure out how to make it so that people didn't feel defensive or in a situation where you were doing something differently?
Yeah, in part. And I think
Uh-huh.
that's why I was kind of a little preemptive with it.
Yeah.
Once I figured out that that could be an issue, but um, it seems to have resolved itself, I guess, because, you hang out with the same people and everyone's got their own issues. So
Right.
Mhm.
this is mine, and
Right. Yeah.
I'm fine.
I do wonder and hope maybe that it seems like people are more used to the idea of using, diet or food as a health strategy, right?
Yeah,
And so it may not be seen as unusual in the way it would have been a decade ago, you know?
yeah.
So hopefully that helps cultivate understanding. And then also the awareness that, like, oh, that's what she's doing for her. That doesn't mean I need to do that for me.
Yeah, and I never push it
Right.
or even recommend it, quite frankly. I'll say,
Right.
well, I would do this if you really need to. This is a great approach,
Right.
but it is somewhat intensive if you just get an occasional migraine, or they're not really interfering with your life. Who am I to say you should make a change? But I have had people who have been in that position where they really are needing to do something, and then I
Mhm.
would be maybe more recommending this approach.
We've talked about this before. It doesn't really work until someone's ready, anyways.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
it doesn't really work to tell them about it if it's not the time.
yeah. And
Um,
I do think this is just a side benefit is I was, in pre-diabetic blood sugar
mm,
range. I had gestational diabetes when I was pregnant. I had been doing what I thought was a healthy diet to prevent diabetes, but year by year, my blood sugar was creeping up. Then when I started doing this plan, my blood sugar now is back in the normal range, which is great.
That's great.
that's
Yes.
phenomenal. Yeah, as you probably know, that will pay huge dividends. In the future, in the coming years.
Yeah,
Um,
and I have a pretty strong genetic history on that.
on
So
that, yeah. Looking forward, do you feel like you kind of have a good system in place and you're just wanting to maintain status quo, or do you have any particular goals or things that you're trying to still kind of implement that you would like to be able to kind of form as a new habit?
I feel pretty good. I honestly feel like I'm doing about what I can, and I'm happy with what I'm doing. I have been able to add more vegetables into my diet,
Uh-huh.
which I
So you're
really like.
experimenting a little bit now.
Yeah,
You've gotten
definitely
to a
That's
better
increasing my
great.
spot. Yeah.
carbs a little bit, and
Hmm.
that seems to be going fine. Um, but everything else, I just feel like is a good life habit. Why wouldn't I want to get enough exercise? Why wouldn't I want to sleep well? Why wouldn't I want to do mindfulness, stress?
Mhm.
I mean, those are all things we should all be doing. So
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, actually, have there been any other, you mentioned the blood sugar, any other improvements or benefits or things that you've noted outside of the migraine piece since you started doing this?
I think my stress management is better. I have
Hmm.
become more aware of it through mindfulness, just identifying my feelings and what's happening rather than just having them absorbed into my body.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And I
easy to
think
do.
that's still a piece I'm working on, but
Hmm.
I think it's a good direction.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, all of these things, I mean, like you mentioned, it's not like we're finished at any point, right? We're
Right.
always, and there's always new challenges, right? We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, so
Yeah.
it's a process for all of us, and
Hmm.
but it's a matter of having those tools in your toolkit to know what
Yeah.
to do.
And I was going to say one other thing so I mentioned in the beginning that in 2017, my migraines started getting worse and I didn't know why. And
Right.
then I think I might have told you this, Jenny, but in 2022, when I got COVID,
Mm.
I was checked in with my rheumatologist because I was taking an immunosuppressant, and he said to stop taking it, for a couple weeks. And then all of a sudden my headaches felt a lot better. And so unbeknownst to me, that medicine is known to cause migraines.
Oh gosh.
So that may have been the initial lead domino.
I think it was, and maybe had things gone differently and I hadn't started taking a triptan around this time, I would have maybe realized that sooner. And I asked my doctor, I said, well, I didn't think to mention to my rheumatologist I was having more migraines. And,
Yep.
and he's like, yeah, and it's kind of tricky because we don't want to suggest to people that they're having migraines either.
Right.
Like it's a fine line. I can see why they don't, but on the other hand, it would have been nice to know.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, that's unfortunately a pretty common scenario, but it is hard. You don't want to suggest a possible symptom for someone, but then
Yeah.
again, people don't necessarily think to connect the two things if they haven't been told, right? This is
Right.
to look out for this. You don't have a reason to think, oh, maybe it's this.
Yeah. And this particular medicine is known to cause suicidal thoughts in some people.
Mm,
And so when I started taking it, the pharmacist actually checked in with
mention that.
me
Right.
every, week or two, just give it to make sure. But so it makes sense if it could cause that sort of effect in your mind, that migraines could also be a
Yeah.
possibility. But
Doing something in the brain, right?
it's doing something in the brain.
Yeah. I was gonna say too, back on you mentioned about nobody had said, you didn't recall anybody having said that triptans were a risk for rebound, and you're probably right that I bet you probably weren't told that. But for the most part, even amongst medical providers, most will tend to associate rebound with things, caffeine-containing medications like Excedrin, as well as like other combination pills that also have Excedrin in them, like Fioricet, Fiorinol. Most people have that association, but don't realize that they're strong with the triptans as well. That's part of why I try to spread that message. So it's good to reinforce.
Yeah. And I don't know if rebound affects everybody or if it's just certain people are more predisposed to it.
It's pretty, I mean, the threshold may vary, but it's a pretty universal response once you get, beyond that threshold for anybody.
Yeah. And in fact, I remember just thinking, wow, I'm so glad I'm taking triptan since my migraines are getting so much worse and much more frequent.
I know. There have been so many people who've thought that same thing, including me for a long time. Anything else you think of that you wanted to share that we haven't covered, or you think we've gotten all the highlights?
I think we've gotten most of the highlights. I just think that the program that you guys have set up has been really helpful. And it's so systematic. And I think if people take the time to go through the program and really understand it, and really you have to go through it more than once, it will be effective. And also for those people, what maybe it takes a little bit longer for, I think that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody would like it to be overnight, but for people like myself, that it just took a little bit longer.
Right. And it's the reason it's effective is because it's holistic. It's many different things, and you can't really implement many different things all at one time, nor can you experience the effects of that all at once. So
Yeah.
It comes with it, in order to, it would be great to have one magic bullet, one true miracle drug that
Right.
would fix it all. But I don't think that's happening in a, based on the nature of the beast. I don't think it can happen, but it's a good point that it's a process, and it's a process that will take different amounts of time because there's so many different factors for each individual person that they're having to deal with. But it's just the consistency and taking one positive step forward, each time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's part of your success, is that you really didn't focus on the outcome. You just focused on the process, and you just kept with it and hung in there, and you just were patient and persistent, and then it happened for you. I was so glad to see you post, about on the Substack newsletter that you were in phase 4.
Oh yeah, that took me a long time. I was
That's
stuck
great.
between phase 3 and phase 4. I think because of the stress piece,
Yeah.
which is somewhat less under your control. And we all have stress in our lives, but just managing acute stress and recognizing it was really tripping me up. So,
But I could see you would check in. I still connected to you on the habit share, and I could see you checking in every day, and you're still at it.
Yeah.
The
I love
Habit
that.
Share app is terrific. I love
It
that
is.
app.
Mhm.
And I think
I
the
love
way
seeing
that,
those.
Me too.
yeah,
Those
no, it's
notifications.
good in the way that, framing it positively,
Mhm.
Yeah.
each and breaking things down into small habits has
That's right.
been effective for me.
You mentioned, that early on you had the confidence that this was going to work, and I feel and we've heard that so many times from people who've been really successful, and it probably not by coincidence. So it takes, and that helps. That's kind of that process orientation. Like, I'm gonna just do this. Once I've committed myself to doing this, I'm just gonna do this. And I think that's almost a universal amongst those who've been really successful. It's why I always am interested to know what gave people that confidence. But I think a big piece for many is hearing these stories like this. So
That's right.
that's why I think it's so helpful to do this, and we appreciate you,
We do.
taking the time to share your story, because it will help give some others the confidence to say, okay, I'm just going to stick with this. And it worked for Anne. So
Yeah,
right.
I listened to all the podcast interviews,
yeah.
probably more than once. And I actually was reviewing them again in preparation for today, just because I enjoyed them all so much. I thought everyone's story was unique, but had some common themes and struggles. And I think they just, hearing how other people have implemented the plan has been helpful.
Yeah. I think they've helped a lot of people keep going, which is really, really big.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Anne.
Thanks, Anne.
All right. Thank you both.
We
Nice
appreciate
to
you.
see you. Okay.
Good to
All
see
right,
you
take
too.
care.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, well, thanks again to Anne for taking the time to share her story with us. Jenny, anything in particular that stood out for you?
Yes, a few things. One of the things that when I was working with her in the Slayer squads, I mentioned that she was having some difficulty navigating the social piece because she did a lot of entertaining. And so I really liked hearing her answer. So not only has she trained her friends and family on her approach and why she's doing it, but I think she's also become more confident in asserting her needs. So I think that's positive. She also mentioned something kind of in passing that I'll elaborate on that came about during our Slayer Squad group. She said that she tells people she's doing this for now. And I believe that was told to us by another one of our group members. And she said that's what had been working with her friends and family, is that when they would question her and, feel like she, with the intermittent fasting wasn't eating enough,
Right.
or were concerned about the approach, she would say, this is something that I'm doing for now. And she said, just by giving them the peace of mind that this is just for now and it's not forever, at least in their minds, that they would give her the space to try something if they thought, it was more of a temporary trial to heal.
Right.
And so just that phrase "for now" was very successful, a successful way to approach that.
Right. That's a really good tip. And I'm glad too that she mentioned the Slayer squads, which are those, for those who don't know, those are small groups that Jenny runs, and those have been, I know, really helpful for a lot of people. And to have you as the resource, but also each other, like
That's
you say,
right.
you guys, people share tips with each other. So I think it's been a great way for people to have a sense of community, right?
Right.
And some people who know what they're going through and can share what's worked for them. So.
And in fact, she mentioned she was talking with one of the other group members. Like, she still talks to her,
right.
and they still keep in touch about a lot of things, but the migraines. And so
Right.
it was nice to hear that they're still connected as well.
Yeah. So people people have formed relationships in there that they've continued on with, which is
That's right.
fantastic. One thing I also think was great from her story, and part of her success for sure, is that she, like a lot of our other super successful people, didn't just focus on the diet piece, as she mentioned in the end. Like her most recent breakthroughs have probably have come from focusing more on kind of the stress piece and the mindset piece, and figuring those out. And it's not always easy to help people get to that place where they realize that's important, but it sounds like she certainly did, and put in the work to now reap the benefits from that.
That's right. And she says, I'm still working on it, so she's still continuing to tweak and optimize.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, this is an ongoing process for everyone.
That's right.
The better we get at it, the better the rewards. Okay, well, thank you again, Anne, for sharing your story with us. And to get connected with us and learn more about what we have to offer, you can head over to mymigrainemiracle.com. All right, thanks so much for listening. Now it's time to go out and slay the beast.